welcome to the ride, episode 2. I'm sitting here with Pat Aiello, head coach, Kellam Lacrosse. We had such a fun time on the first episode, got a lot of great feedback from folks in the area and outside the area even, so we're going to go and run it back, and I'm happy to be sitting here. Again, like I said, Pat's a good friend of mine, a great offensive mind in the game, so just happy to be sitting here with you, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. I mean, I enjoyed watching the first episode with Coach Hargrave, giving his take on the game of lacrosse, and he's such a wizard with the game, a good friend of mine as well, so happy to be here.
What was your favorite part?
Oh my God. One of the best parts, I have to say, was Shep on the couch. That was awesome. I have to say that was pretty cool.
Hopefully he makes his way back here. So really, man, you had a lot of prep. I'm excited for this. You sent me a 98. Like, when was this video taken? Like, right before the show, Pat sent me a highlight of him going high to low, bottom right corner, and it looked like it was from the 80s.
It definitely wasn't from the 80s because I was born in the 80s, so I'll give you on that one. It was from 1999. You said 98. I don't want to make myself that old. I was in 10th grade, and we were playing in the county finals against Farmingdale, which was our high school rival. And it was just one of those where I kind of sent it to you. I'm like, this is how much the game has changed. It was on VHS. You know, the graphics look like it's Super Mario Brothers when, it's a high school lacrosse game. But it just kind of gave you that, like, the whole point was to give you that take, like, wow, how has the game has changed.
I'm going to actually input that video into...
Oh, my gosh. That's going to be embarrassing. But you know what? Go for it, man. You're going to see the difference in how much the game has changed. And that's kind of one of the things that I think we were going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Let's go into it. So you're sitting there as a high schooler on Long Island playing the game. I would love to get kind of your experience. I know you've been... There's so many different spots. I mean, from Florida to Mississippi at Ole Miss, dealing with MCLA ball, to Virginia. I mean, we coached together at Catholic. There's so many different things you did. Just interested in kind of your story.
I mean, I don't even know where to start. I've had the blessings of being all over the country. I mean, Oxford, Mississippi. I know you've been there before. Yeah. Atlanta, Georgia. Clearwater Beach, Florida. Now Virginia. Growing up, Long Island guy, just kind of like a Hargrave, I think, one of the things I took with me from all the places I've coached throughout the country is just that blue collar mentality. Long Island, you're taught that blue collar mentality, and that's how I've coached. I've had some pretty cool places that I've coached, and honestly, each place has helped shape me as a coach. It wasn't like, okay, I know everything, I'm from Long Island. It's not that at all. You learn as you go along, and you coach in different places. I mean, and we'll talk about it later with Kellam, but there was a lot of mistakes that I made as a coach at a younger age that I'm like, I look back now, I'm like, I'm definitely not making that mistake, and it makes you a better coach.
What are some of those mistakes? Like, what stands out to you, like top 2 or 3 that you made when you were in your younger years?
I think it's over managing a game. I think it's, as a coach, you're fiery. When I was really fiery and, too energetic, and then in a bad way. Like, having these expectations of kids to do things that you think that should be done. When you really got to realize they're high school kids. They're going to make mistakes. But you live in that perfect world because that's how you were coached. And it's not. And kids are going to make mistakes. It's how you teach them to adapt to making those mistakes and fixing it. That was one of the biggest mistakes I made. I think also I cursed at a ref the very first varsity game I coached and got thrown out of the game.
Thrown out?
Yeah. And again, stupid mistake when I was a young coach. I learned. Any ref I've spoken to, we've had a great relationship ever since. So again, young guys out there who want to be coaches or just becoming coaches, the best advice I give to you is become good friends with the refs. If you got an issue with something, question them. Just question them simply. Hey, I didn't understand that call. You never know. That could come back to help you down at the end of the game.
I feel like a lot of times once you actually become a ref or you start reffing a couple times, then you're like, okay, I see it from a different angle. This is what this feels like to be just berated by an individual, as opposed to maybe calmly talk to and say, hey, what did you see there?
It's very true. I mean, you can even sit there when you watch lacrosse games. You're like, the people are yelling at the refs for making a call in like a college game if you're watching on ESPNU or something. And you're like, well, that was a penalty, even though you're seeing the coach. It is the angle. You may think it's a penalty or it's not a penalty, but you're not really there. And refs have a thankless job. I mean, they get berated, and I give them a ton of respect.
Yeah, 100%. All right, guys, we are going to get into this discussion. I'm getting some mic difficulties here right in the middle of the episode. Also, shout out to Coach Berkey, man. Berkey called me last night. I appreciate you. Yeah, I think you probably gave him my number. Had a good convo. He told me to sign up for the fall league, but dude, that's my old high school coach. I just wanted to give him some flowers, man. He's one of the ones that taught me the game initially, and so to hear from him was really cool.
Yeah,
and you coach with him now.
He makes it so much fun. I tell you, he has the driest sense of humor, and in intense moments, he can make you laugh, and that's what you need on a coaching staff. 100%.
I actually was asking him like questions I could have here to grill you with, and he didn't give me any. So
I'm surprised he didn't.
Yeah, no, 100%.
That's awesome.
I think he was like busy just grilling me at the time. But dude, tell me a little bit. So I want to make our way. I don't want to spend too much time in the kind of timeline of you at Hofstra and throughout your coaching career, but I do want to touch on it. You were a Division I college lacrosse player. That is certainly a goal of a lot of people, but also just people want kind of the insight into what the day-to-day is in that lifestyle. I
mean, I'll just give you a quick synopsis because I don't want to spend my, all of our time on this, but I will tell you this. Even in the fall, I remember my freshman year, it was September of 2001. That's how old I am, the life of a college Division I lacrosse player it's a job. And this was 20-something years ago, okay? I can only imagine what it's like now. But you would be up at 5 a.m. with the strength coach. You were running or lifting. And I'm telling you, it wasn't a strength coach he was in your face. And and if you were slacking at all, he'd be all over you. You're doing that till about 7 a.m. Then you're going to class from about 8 till about 2. And then you go to practice from 3 till about 5. And then if you're a freshman, you're going to study hall till about 7:30. And then all of a sudden, you're back in your dorm room and you don't know what hit you. Again, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but it is a full-time commitment. And I'm sure it's very similar to now. There's probably a lot of things that have changed, but it's a commitment. It is a full-time job. And, lacrosse is a great game. It's so much fun to play. I have so many friends from it. But if you want to play at that level, you have to commit yourself 150%.
Yeah. Was it something of like being at a college so close to home that you were like, look, I need to do something else? Was that eventually what?
As far as lacrosse-wise?
Yeah, lacrosse-wise, because eventually you left the lacrosse team.
Yeah, for me, I wasn't ready for college yet. I mean, as simple as that. I was not mature enough to go to college yet. And, I remember going home and telling my dad I was leaving Hofstra, and he goes, well, guess what? You're going to go to community college and you're going to pay your own way. And I'm at 19 years old, and I'm like, pay? I'm like, I don't even know what that meant. And when I got the bill for $1,400 a semester at National Community College, life hit me real fast. But you know what? It was a great life moment, great life lesson. It taught me so much as a professional. I'm glad that happened because I learned so much. I learned the value of education because I pay for it. And then I had other opportunities. I could have went back and played Division I, but I decided to stay home, go to Malloy College. I had all my school paid for. So I was like, you know what? I'm doing well being at home. I don't know if I want to go away at this point.
Okay, last question I have on the Hofstra front. That jump from high school to that level, biggest thing that stood out to you at the time?
The speed of the game, the strength. I remember going in the fall practice. I had, Nikki Polanco, Brian Zucchelli. These are two major defenders playing me, and I'm like, whoa. It hits you like a ton of bricks. And it's like, welcome to the NFL,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you probably had those moments.
Yeah, and, again, I was kind of like awestruck. I was like, whoa. I know a lot of these names. I mean, I watched these guys. Hofstra the year before was in the NCAA quarterfinals, and they lost to Syracuse, who had Mikey Powell, was one of the best lacrosse players I've ever seen. So I was like, wow, this is a rude awakening. You live in that fantasy world in high school because you're on Long Island, you play at one of the better schools, and then all of a sudden you get to the Division I level, you're like, wow, this is a whole other ball game.
You mentioned Mikey Powell. I had never watched him in person.
I saw him in person multiple times. He's probably he had the quickest first step And I tell you, in today's playing time against the teams and these players now, he would still beat kids. I mean, just like he did back then. Mm-hmm. If you watch highlight, I'm sure you have seen highlight videos. Sure. His first step, his stick work, his vision. I mean, he was probably one of the perfect lacrosse players I've ever seen play the game, hands down.
All right, hopping out of this, let's go to your first coaching gig. Again, you've been a bunch of places. I want to give each spot a little bit of love, but I want to get in between the lines and get into your mind on the offensive side of things. So let's start at your first spot and see where it goes. My
first head coaching job?
Yeah, sure. Or assistant if you,
Well, I kind of started with my high school team on Long Island at Massapequa. And then I was at Adelphi helping out for a couple of years, and that's kind of where I learned a little about the college game, and I enjoyed it. And then I found out my brothers were going to Adelphi, and I kind of didn't want to get involved in that anymore. So I was kind of living in my parents' house. I was like 26 years old, which I should have been out of my parents' house way before. But, things happen. And I was looking for any excuse to get out of Long Island because I couldn't find any jobs there. I mean, getting a teaching job on Long Island is impossible. And I applied to be the head lacrosse coach at Ole Miss. I didn't think they were going to call me. Well, they called me. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, I didn't really take it seriously at first.
Long Island to Oxford, Mississippi.
Yes, Long Island to Oxford, Mississippi. And I have stories. But anyway,
it's like coming to America.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it was like going into I don't even like another planet.
Yeah, sure.
But they called me and I went down there. I checked it out and I just said, I got back and I said, I don't know. Am I going to do this or am I not going to do this? And then something came over me and you remember I never left Long Island. So this was like a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I just said, I'm going to do it. And I packed up my Honda Civic and I moved to Oxford, Mississippi with like $4,000 in my pocket, no job, taking over, being a part-time coach in the MCLA. And that's, sure. And you know what? I'm glad I did it. It was one of the best experiences.
Yeah, the MCLA experience. So I went to Auburn. First of all, I would love to have Coach Arminio on the podcast, by the way. Shout out to Britton, who was following the podcast. He's one of my teammates from those days. We actually probably you were coaching. I was probably playing.
I think my first year was 2012. I think we might have played each other. Yeah. And we didn't even know each other. That's the funny part. Yeah.
No, it's a fun time, man. MCLA gives you so many different experiences. And, there's such a range of individuals and talent at that level. Like some of the best players that I've seen. And I've seen Division I players that in high school. I play with them. I obviously coach some now. But you're sitting there like, holy crap, that kid can play.
Oh, I mean, and you probably saw this at Auburn. I mean, we played Florida State. And those kids, they had players on that team. We played the University of Texas. Has players on that team. Yeah, and Paul Rabel said it. He goes, the MCLA is a real deal.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think if I would have done it all, if I could do it all over again, I would have went your route. I would have went the MCLA. I probably would have went out to like California or something because that's just my personality. But you know what? I mean, I think it's awesome. I think it's only going to get better and better.
Yeah. And you went to Florida post Ole Miss?
No, I actually moved to start a varsity program in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
What school? It was called Pinecrest Academy.
Pinecrest.
And I remember getting there, and they went from middle school to JV to varsity. Like there was no they wanted to go, and I remember looking at that roster being like, oh my gosh, there's all 9 to 10 graders. Mm-hmm. And I said, you realize we're going to struggle this first year because they were babies. But they ended up that by year 3 we made the playoffs. We were 10-4 or something.
Sure.
But you know what? We were building it, and that's when I got another opportunity. That's the beautiful thing about lacrosse is you get opportunities.
There is opportunities there, and you really don't have to look that far when it comes. I mean, geographically you might, but when it comes to just like pinging somebody and saying, "Hey, I see the job's open. Hell yeah, come down. If you've got the energy to do it, do it."
Oh, 100%. And that's kind of, I guess people call me the lacrosse nomad. I mean, the game of lacrosse has brought me all over the country.
Is there any difference between the players that you see? I know it's been far and wide, but is there a difference between a Florida player and a Virginia player or anything like that?
I think it's more personality. I don't think it's so much play. I mean, personalities are different all over the country. I mean, you really have to learn how to adapt. And also coaching kids in that way because different personalities. Every kid's coached differently, and you have to adapt to that personality.
I love it. All right, guys, we're going to get into kind of the more inside the line stuff here in a second. I do want your take on Catholic but I had to stop the show because when I brought up what was the favorite part about the Mark Hargrave podcast that Aiello listened to, he said it was definitely Shep.
You know what,
And we
though?
got
That was
Shep
one of
here.
the funniest parts. But, I mean, everything that Mark
No, of
said
course.
was spot on. I mean, you know, I couldn't agree with anything more that Mark talked about. Mark knows the game so well, and we've known each other for a long time. So, I mean, everything that you guys talked about was great. You hit on some great topics.
Yeah, sure. I enjoyed our time together coaching at Catholic. Interested in your thoughts on that it wasn't a new program per se, but it was very much taking a program that had never done something before and was ramping up to that point where they could.
Yeah, I mean, when I coached with you guys, and we had a blast, obviously, you saw the early stage of something really big happening. I mean, and there a couple things need to be tweaked, and that's what happened. And you guys made that awesome run in 23, which, by the way, I was at that first NA game. I caught the end of it. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, it was fun times. Look, I got some NA guys listening to the show too now, so we have to be
Oh,
impartial.
no. Listen, you're my guys. You're my boys. That's nothing. NA is a phenomenal program. Not speaking ill will about them, but I have to root. You guys are my guys.
So, all right. So now we're kind of capping off the end of kind of where you're at now, right? You went to Bayside. Now you're at Kellam. Give me a little bit of that, and then let's dive into some inside the line stuff, and we'll have a discussion on Kellam too.
Sure. So, Kellam, I wasn't even planning on even coaching. I was just gonna take the year off last year, and because I was a little burned out. I'll be honest. Last year was my 22nd year coaching lacrosse, which is I still can't believe it, and I just wanted to take some time off. I had some health issues, but you know. I was asked to go help at Kellam as a volunteer, and I'm like, you know what, I can give you guys 2 days a week, and you know, things change, some changing of some circumstances, and you know, an opportunity arose, and you know, it was definitely one of the funnest, best coaching experiences I've had, hands down.
Okay, so I post break we're gonna dive into Kellam real quick. Bayside taking a first year program. Right, like that must have been a fucking experience as well.
It was. I wasn't supposed to be the head coach at the beginning of the season. I don't know how I get myself in these situations. My buddy Parker was going to be the coach, and then he ended up getting a job change, and I stepped in. And you saw, so you were there for some of it.
Yep.
A lot of it was, you know, it is a challenge, you know. I mean, the biggest thing is when you're a competitive coach, you want to compete in games. And when you don't have that, it gets frustrating. But you can't let that – you got to start set – like a team like that, you got to set goals. You can't have expectations, right? Our goal, let's catch and throw. Let's learn how to catch and throw. That's going to take time, right? Let's learn how to run an offense. Let's learn how to clear the ball. It took time. So we were not playing to the speed of those other teams that were a little bit better than us because we didn't have kids that were playing as long as some other kids. But we did compete athletically. You know, we played hard. I mean, we made the region playoffs. And the kids, listen, it was a great experience for me. And but it's a lot of work.
You beat teams that were similarly skilled as you. That was the big thing that stuck out to me. When I went out to the practices, the kids were getting after it. It was the first year. It's tough to – I mean, the kids don't know their left from their right. You know, they don't understand what level the game should be played at. And so you're kind of leading that ship, and it's tough when you don't have guys that know what it looks like, what that end product looks like.
Yeah, and you know what? I had a couple kids that would literally ask me for a couple of balls at the end of practice every day so they could go throw the ball up against the wall.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a couple kids on that team that were committed, and that's what I loved about coaching that team because they were just they grinded it out. Yeah.
So kind of hopping in between the lines, right? We're talking strategy, tactics a little bit, but just kind of within that coaching sphere. At Bayside, you dealt with it. At Kellam, you're dealing with it. At Ole Miss, I understood that, you know, MCLA, very top heavy when it comes to the skill, right? You got guys that could play in college, and you got guys that can barely catch and throw. And that's how those rosters are constructed. Sure. So really, from a coaching perspective, how are you looking at dealing with inexperienced versus experienced players and kind of how you practice, how you develop your roster over the season when it comes to having such a disparity? Because I know you have that at Kellam too. You guys are deep, but you probably have a strong group, right? And then you got guys that are just maybe even picking up the game for the first time.
I mean, you know, I think it's, again, you have to set goals for kids. You got to challenge kids. Like, I don't believe in separating, okay, we have the drill killers over here and we got our best players. Because what are you doing for those kids? They're not going to make them better. And we actually had some kids last year that pushed other kids to get better. I think that's a huge part of it. I think you have to set goals for kids. You got to tell kids, hey, listen, this is what you need to work on. I need you to work on this. If you challenge kids, they're going to rise to the occasion most of the time if they really want it. And I think that's what you have to do because like splitting them up like that, you're dividing your team. Sure. I've seen it in the past with what coaches have done that. Like, oh, those are drill killers. Like, don't use that word. That's part of your team, man. You need to have those kids involved, but you got to challenge them too. And you're going to trust me, if you really get to know some of these kids, they want to play at the players that are elite on your team's level. But challenging them, giving them confidence, that's huge. That's how you really deal with that.
Let's talk about shooting. Every time that we've kind of gotten together, and it's mainly the X's and O's talk. A lot of what comes out of your mouth is about shooting. I'm teaching a kid how to do this. I'm teaching a kid how to do that, and a lot of it is these kids don't know exactly how to be efficient shooting the ball. And so, in your skills sessions, in Kellam practice, how are you approaching shooting the ball?
Well, I will say this. I do see a lot of kids, and I'm not speaking for all kids, of course. A lot of kids like to shoot sidearm, but they have to learn how to shoot regularly before they can shoot sidearm. A lot of kids like to look like that flashy look, but there's certain mechanics you have to follow. Once you learn how to become a true natural shooter, then you can start dropping your stick a little bit. But again, it's teaching the fundamentals of it. I mean, there's so much that goes into shooting that you really don't know about. It's the mechanics. It's knowing when and where to shoot it. It's your release. I mean, there's so much. When I go through with a lot of my, like with the shooting academy that I run, it is mechanics. We're not out there just shooting lacrosse balls. You're teaching them how to use their hips, turning their hips, squaring their shoulders, so many different things. Rotating their wrists. I mean, so many different things that kids, the mistakes that they make in the games, it's just that it's not the proper technique. And it's correctable. And
Sure.
What I do with kids is when I'm working with kids, I'll film them and I'll show them like, hey, this is what you do and this is what I'm talking about. Because kids need to see it. They could hear you say it, but that doesn't register because they're not seeing it.
That's especially true, and I've utilized the film just for my phone sometimes. That's what you're doing at your sessions, I guarantee it, is the kids are kind of programmed to take in info that way. They're watching Instagram, they're watching Reels, like they understand that visual side of things. I think that's underutilized from a coaching perspective by a lot of people.
It is. I mean, I sometimes, like, I'm in the process of trying to get our practices taped this year so I can see what's going on in practice, because you just solely base it on games, which is good, don't get me wrong, but you got to see what's going on in practice, because the kids see they're doing it in practice, then they're going to say, okay, this isn't working, let's change it, I think that's an important piece. Kids need to see how they shoot, how they play, where they're making the mistakes. We can tell them 100,000 times, but it may not register.
Sure.
It doesn't work for every kid that way.
What's the biggest mistake these kids are making whenever you're doing your shooting clinic, which, by the way, I'd love for you to plug for a second. You're running them at the vault, right?
I run some at the vault, and I do some individually on my own.
Okay, cool. So I'll put the stuff in the description that needs to be had.
Sure.
Maybe your phone number or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But as far as the players that come in, what's like the most common mistake you're looking at from like, dude, stop doing that?
It's bringing the stick over the top. Kids like to immediately drop their stick to the side,
Sure.
drop their stick low, because they see, again, on Instagram and YouTube and all that the good college players, the pros shooting out like that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you got to become elite to actually start doing that stuff. And to become elite, you got to learn the finer mechanics of things. Learning how to properly shoot. Kids got to learn how to bring the stick over the top when they shoot, right? Rotate their hips, square their shoulders. You'd be surprised if you watch kids shoot. Sometimes they miss the cage because their shoulders aren't square to the cage. Their shoulders are square off the cage. They're not rotating their hips all the way. Quicker releases. Kids don't release the ball quick enough. There's so many different facets we could talk about with shooting.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get into the high-level stuff for sure. I want to give a shout-out quickly to the kid over at NSA, man. I think his name is Cooper Goss, I believe, big dude. I mean, he had some of the best mechanics that I've seen he's obviously a bigger dude, so he's able to get a little bit of
I know you're
size.
talking about.
But dude, he had that like Brennan O'Neill release,
Yes.
back behind the head, all the way through, and just the goalie couldn't even see it because of where he would release it.
Yeah, and it's funny. Yeah, you said the release, right? That release. I try to teach when I first work with a player. I teach them. I'm like, you ever play baseball before? Yeah. And most of them will say yes. Some of them don't, but some of them say yes. And I teach them, I'm like, well, it's like pitching a baseball. It's the same movement, right? You just have a stick in your hand. Baseball, a pitcher brings that ball over the top. Okay, getting that, and I'll have kids literally throw a lacrosse ball like if they're pitching just to get into that movement. But it teaches them that, and that's the movement you want. It's not this. There's times where you have to drop your stick in certain situations, but learning how to correctly shoot over the top, that's the biggest piece of it,
How are you looking at coaching a kid like the kid Gennady that you had, who was an awesome player? I think he was a U.S. Lacrosse All-American.
Yes.
How do you look at teaching him how to shoot versus a kid that is maybe middle of the road?
Evan, I mean, I was fortunate enough to have Evan last year in the middle, like right at the beginning of the season when I took over the team. He was well-groomed as a player. Evan, more so, he was like having another coach out there, believe it or not. I mean, he knows the game extremely well. I hope he does coach one day. And Evan, if you are listening, I hope you do coach. There would be times where I would say, hey, this goalie, you might want to start shooting off hip. He's not receptive to that. And Evan would, I say, like, watch the goalie before the game. And he would, but, I mean, he had a pretty good understanding of where to put the ball. But he also drew a lot of attention, too. Mm-hmm. And what really helped Evan, his game last year, was that attention he drew, because the other part of his game besides his shooting got really good. His assist, I think he had 69 assists. He was making looks, especially in the beginning of the season. Kids weren't ready for those passes.
All right, guys, we have to take a break really quick. Insert sponsorship ad that's not there, but see you on the other side. All right, welcome back to the ride. Zach Quezada, Pat Aiello. We were just talking about shooting. Going to make it back into that discussion. Let's just hop back into it. You said pointing butt end at the target, you're never going to miss.
There's a process to it. It has to be taught a certain way, but if you're pointing that butt end at the net, you're squaring your shoulders, you're rotating your hips, you're going to put that ball on the net 99.9% of the time. I'm telling you right now. But there's a certain way to go about it. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to go in my backyard right now and point it at the net. No, there's a certain, routine. There's certain repertoire I had to teach for you to actually do that. But there is a way, to learn how to shoot pointing the butt end at the cage and not missing the cage.
How do you look at the amount of reps that a kid needs to be putting in, like, on a weekly basis when it comes to shooting? Because you could say all that stuff, but if he's not actually getting out there.
I mean, you got to immerse yourself into, the game. If you want to become a good shooter, you need to go out all the time, not just working with somebody, going out all the time. I can remember I didn't have the luxury of having somebody train me one-on-one. I used to go in my parents' backyard, and I would literally shoot until my arms fell off because I wanted to be good, and I pictured myself in the moment. Sometimes when you're doing this stuff, you got to picture yourself in the moment, because when that moment comes, you're going to be like, oh, I was prepared for this. I was ready for this, And speaking of a guy who immerses himself in it, it's Jake Lyons, our Faceoff guy. I've never seen a kid immerse himself so much into the game of lacrosse. And with the way he faces off, all the reps he puts in. I mean, I think from what I heard, he has a little turf patch. He literally takes face-offs on at home. And I think that's great. But again, that's going to pay dividends for him down the road.
That is such an interesting point. People see the end result, right, of him winning all the face-offs and all that stuff, but they don't see that he has a turf, like a fake patch, basically, of grass at his house where he's practicing. Also, face-off position is hilarious to me because they have such a different relationship with the fan base. Like, I went to go see Virginia play Notre Dame a couple of years back, and Pete LaSala was still on the team, and the whole stadium, like especially the group, which is the families that come to the games, they all love, like, it's all about Petey, Petey. That's the same thing. It's the same thing with Lions, though. Your whole stands were like Jake.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what though? I mean, you got to remember, face-off guys. People. I hate the word FOGO. I don't like that word those guys bring energy to the field. Like Jake brought energy to our team. He ignited our team so many times. When you're winning faceoffs, and you know this as a coach, when you start winning faceoffs, you gain momentum because you're getting possessions. But it's also and you're winning successfully, and the way he plays too. I mean, there was a couple games where he was playing one-on-one defense. Breaking guys down, getting the ball going down the other field and scoring. There was one time we were playing Bishop O'Connell's actually at Catholic, where he rode a guy, stuck his stick up, picked off a pass, ran up front of the goalie, and just stuck it on him. I'm like, what can't this kid do? I mean, but he works. He's a worker.
Do you input the face-off guys into practice? Like, how much do you not input them into practice is probably the question.
Regular practice?
Yeah, just like, is he taking shots? Is he doing the uneven work?
I have him doing it, but he'll always be like, Coach, I'm going to go over there and do some face-off stuff. And I want him to do it. But I'm like, dude, I need you too. Because there was times last year, and Jake had pulled his hamstring where he got hurt. Well, I had him in on offense. You got to remember, he's a freaking athlete, man. He can run like a deer. So, again, we won our face-off guys because, look, there's times you're going to get stuck on the field, whether you're on offense or defense. You need to be ready for those situations.
Yeah, I know I sound like a Virginia stan here. I'm not even, like, the biggest Virginia fan of all time. I like them because they're in state and they, rep. But the face-off play, like the transition play, especially from the immediate face-off to offense, is so awesome. Especially when they had PD, they were, like, thinking about it at such a high level. Did you ever get into that with knowing that you were going to win the face-off, what you could do with a guy like Jake?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I also didn't want to – this is the thing with the overcoaching, right? You want them to feel it out there. I always tell my guys, look, you got to have your head up. Don't just be looking at the point guy because most times teams are going to cheat. And this is a defense. They'll cheat up to the point guy, whereas that bottom low left or right guy is wide open. If you have the vision and you remember you got to make that pass there too. There's so many nuances with it, but yeah, 100%.
I would love to get to that level of the game. It feels like something that you get to on like the 20th practice, right? Like, okay, when we win a face-off, you're actually going to take your guy to X and we're going to isolate with the Fogo because that's what, or we're going to set that down pick on the wing and then we're going to get a switch where the defenseman's now on our Fogo and we'll see if we can sub off of that. Like all of that stuff fascinates me, man. We never seem to get to it.
No, I remember getting really into it. I think it was either in Florida or Atlanta, one of my high school teams, where I had the guy take the face-off guy. I said, listen, I want you to hit the point guy and continue running and pick that bottom attackman, and that attackman comes off the pick, and that guy hits him with the pass.
Yeah.
But it's got to be. I mean, your stick work's got to be precision, right?
Yes.
Your passes, everything. It's got to be there. The timing, everything. Your picks, everything. It's huge.
Yeah. Transitioning more to the offensive side of things when it comes to like just looking at the 6-on-6 game, how much do you put into like, hey, we want to run this scheme, right? We want to run it where you go down, set that pick in that spot, he comes off of it, or how much of it is, hey, you guys know the game, I've taught you in practice. How much of it is scheme? How much of it is letting the guys just run?
A couple things, right? You're going to teach offense. There's so many nuances to that. That's a whole other, podcast discussion. But when you're running offenses, there's pick set, obviously, if you're running right offenses. But, you have to teach a kid how to properly set a pick. That's a big thing. That is the biggest misconception in lacrosse. People do not know how to set picks correctly. And you know what it is? You're not picking the other players. You're picking your own man. And that guy runs off, and that's the biggest. That's how picks work. People will run, and then if defensively, you just play aside.
I know.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to let that out.
Yeah, dude, that is such a great point because it's almost like the biggest misnomer in the game right now. They see the picks being run at the college level, at the professional level, and they're like, "Oh, we need to have picks, and we need to have picks in our offense." 95% of high school picks suck.
Because they're not. Because you know what? I'll tell you what it is. They're not practiced enough. You have to spend a good portion of practice on how to set picks, because I'm telling you right now, when kids learn how to set picks, you will not believe how fast your offense starts scoring after that. Yep. And again, to finish your other part of that question, when during a game, it's not so much coaching, it's managing. Because I look at it as I'm a teacher. I look at it as like, okay, I've taught you. Now you're going to take the test. And I've had coaches in the sidelines try to coach. I'm like, don't let them figure it out. We'll talk to them during timeouts because they're not going to hear us from the field. You know, you make your adjustments at halftime, timeouts, but they're taking the test. That's how I look at it.
It's such a different mentality. I mean, I know there's some defensive coaches that are kind of hands off, but I always talk to the offensive coaches, and they're kind of just. It's very much a cliche. They're kind of laissez-faire, like hands off. It's hilarious at Catholic because Coach Tommy and Deal both coach the offense, and they never use timeouts. Like there's a time coming down to the end of the thing. I'm like, guys, are you gonna call timeout? They're like, no, just let them play, let them figure it out. You know, like we have the opportunity to take the defense unaware is kind of how I think they look at it. But from my perspective, I'm like, I want to use timeouts, man. I'm always in it, but
I mean, I'm the king of timeouts. I'm always like in a tense situation because you know what it is. I just got a knack for it. I know. I'm like, all right, timeout. We're calling timeout. Just because, hey, our heads are up our butts right now. We're not paying attention. We're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're playing lackadaisical. We're not hitting our rhythm. Or it could be a situation where the ball's right there and there's two guys about to knock your guy out. What do? You need possession, right? Timeout.
Sure.
I mean, you got to have a presence of mind on it.
I feel like we were right in the meat of that pick discussion, man. And I have to say, again, I know I'm kind of giving up our secrets a little bit, but you can figure it out if you watch any fucking film. I don't know if offenses even watch defensive film, but once you as a defensive coach teach the defense how to play against a pick correctly, which for me is maintaining the matchup, right? Just like the off-ball guy should help support the on-ball guy. You get him a little chip or something and just go under for the most part, and you'll solve 95% of picks that are thrown at you. They're either thrown lazily, they're thrown in the wrong spot. It's just not done well. And I feel like they throw it in there as a quota. They're like, we got to run a couple pick plays this game. But nobody runs it. I'll tell you one thing. Collegiate ran a nice little pairs offense out of Richmond. They did pretty well. They seem to understand it, but not many teams do.
I mean, I think, offense is, I think one of the things we were talking about, you had asked me, was how do you coach an offense? It's simple. I mean, how our offenses run nowadays, right? I think they're more sets than actual plays. When we were younger, it was like, for me at least, a coach would have specific plays. It's more sets, and you got to get into a flow. I think the biggest thing is your team, your offense has to build chemistry, and that takes time. I think some coaches get frustrated early in the season, like, oh, we're not hit. You got that. That takes time. Every team's different, It took us a little bit to get going offensively, but once we did, we were pouring it on. I mean, but it took time. Guys had to feel each other out. You guys got to feel where they're going to be on the field. You know what I mean? And the biggest thing is you got to have your head up when you go into the cage. Kids don't have it. A lot of kids will run with their head down. They're not seeing. And that's why we do a drill in practice. I wanted to bring this up. Yeah. We do 3-on-3s. And and here's the thing with the 3-on-3s. You can't pass the ball until you draw a slide. So a lot of kids, we did it yesterday. Kids were literally throwing the ball. And I'm like, guys, I had to stop it. I'm like, you have to draw a slide. Why? Well, it helps the defense with rotating, right? And then offensively, you'd be amazed. Guys have to learn how to backdoor guys or follow the slide. There was kids just still standing there. I'm like, guys, you're not helping us standing there. You got to get into the
bought a ticket to the show.
Yeah, you have a layup right there. But again, it's awareness, right? So you got to, I think, when you're in practice, you have to have meticulously. You could do drills, but what's the point of them?
Sure. I know we were talking a lot of smack on the way picks are set now in high school, but from your perspective, like I love picks. Don't get me wrong. Like I agree with you. If you understand how to actually set them and do it, it could be extremely effective. Extremely effective because you're forcing the defense into all type of different scenarios that even in a dodging scenario you never get. So how do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I mentioned before, and you clarified it for me because I think I was saying it wrong. Picking your own man, you're picking the guy who's covering you, not your teammates, the guy who's covering your teammate.
So it's more of a seal.
It is more of a seal, because again, that's harder for a defender to play through if you do that, especially if you know how, and you have to effectively teach an offensive player to run a guy off a pick. That's like the kids will run way outside the guy. You got to be almost brushing his shoulder, and you got to run inside and then brush him off.
Okay. So what about placement? Where are you setting the picks? Is it different for each player?
I think it's different for the offense you're running. It could be on the crease. It could be behind at X. It could be on the wing. Or goal line extended, I should say.
One thing I'm not as let's stay in that combo, but one thing
Sure.
I'm not as experienced on is teaching the off-ball pick defense, right? I think offenses look at that way more than I think defense do. I think defense is like scramble, make sure you're on your guy. Offenses actually, I think, get into the nuance of like, this is how we're going to pick off ball.
Yeah, I think it all depends on, again, the offensive set you're running, right? What defense you're playing. I think, for me, there's a game plan for every game.
Mm-hmm.
I game plan for every game. Every team's different. We watch film. That's one thing that we do as a team. We watch film. That's big, and we see what other teams are doing. And I think that's how you curtail how you're going to run how you're going to play that defense, or how you're going to play that offense.
So the toughest games you had this year, when you're looking at them as kind of like game scout, pregame, all that type of stuff, what were you seeing, and what kind of stuff pick-wise were you looking at, if any, or was it more isolation kind of thing?
I think you got to look for tendencies. What teams' tendencies are, and you got to learn to exploit them. So as far as picks go, there's certain times where we were going to pick. Our offense, what we ran last year was, and again, that changes every year because
Sure.
I'm not stuck on one offense. It's what I have is how I'm going to adapt to the offense I run. We ran a 3-1-2 last year, a high 3-1-2, where guys were. Our offense just flowed, but guys were moving off ball. And we ran that offense because we had the guys to do it, the Dodgers to do it, and guys had a presence of mind like Evan and Colt. They were two guys that were able to recognize, okay, this guy's sliding, I'm going to cut back door, because we created long slides. And if you create long slides, it goes back to what I'm saying. I know I got a little off topic there, but you create long slides, then it's a lot easier to pick because guess what? That you're pulling that guy all the way out, you set a pick, guys are going to be wide open.
Mm-hmm. I love the idea of bringing a guy towards the ball as well, and that takes him away from off-ball play. Yeah. Right now, it's 4 guys playing off-ball as opposed to 5.
Right.
So, shot selection. When we talked a lot about shooting earlier in the episode, the nuance of having a player that understands this is a good shot to take or this is not a good shot to take, and without feeling like you're kind of held back.
Yeah, I think when we talked about it before, and I know other coaches will say this, when you see that guy, that midi or whatever, run up the field on a fast break, and you have a clean path to the cage, and he shoots it right in the goalie stick. It's having the presence of mind, like, hey, this is where you got to teach. Like, hey, I'm running down here. Okay, your stick's up here. Where do you think the goalie stick's going to be? Right, your goalie's going to follow where the ball is. Right. So again, you have to have the presence of mind on the field, and that takes time. Practice. You have to practice these things. That's the problem. Kids don't practice stuff, and they're in the moment, and they just shoot because they don't know what else to do. You got to look at what the net is giving you, right? You got to look what the goalie's giving you, right? I look at a net. There's 3 triangles on the net. There's the big triangle, and there's 2 small triangles.
Sure.
You should be aiming. If I'm running down the field in a fast break, I'm shooting way opposite, low corner, where that goalie is going to have the hardest time to catch it.
How much of a leash do you give maybe some of the guys that are more experienced? I know we had the inexperienced to experienced combo before. Are you giving them more of a leash, or like I'm just interested in how offensive coaches look at that was a good shot as opposed to not?
I think, I let them know if it's a good shot. Like they'll know right away. They'll see my reaction. It comes to this highlight. It's not like I yell. I just say, you think that was a really good shot? You think that was the shot you should have taken?
You yell.
I don't yell. You can ask my guys. I don't yell anymore.
Okay.
I calm down quite a bit. I don't scream and yell. Do I have my moments? Yeah, where I'm trying to get guys fired up.
Sure.
But it's more like, again, man, it's more managing the game. When you're in a game, you're managing it. There's time to pump your team up. That's before the game or at halftime if you're trying to, But another thing I noticed too, watching film, to plan against offenses or defenses, some teams don't make adjustments.
Yeah, a lot of teams.
And it's like
Hard adjustments, yeah.
There was multiple teams we played last year that just didn't make adjustments. I'm like, all right, we're just going to keep doing this until they could stop it, and they can't.
What were the hardest games you played last year? I look, we have about 10 minutes left. I appreciate you guys making it to this point in the episode. We've had multiple camera outages. It is the episode that can go on.
We're filming a movie here, by the way.
So let's quickly talk on the Kellam season. You guys went to the state playoffs for the first time. And
Well, they went to the state playoffs last year.
okay, you guys won
In
a
the
game
playoffs.
for the first time.
Yes.
Okay, in the playoffs. Okay. As far as next season is concerned and kind of looking at last, like what was the best game when you kind of had to make those adjustments and say, okay, you know, that was a good coaching job by my staff. And then what are you looking forward with Kellam?
Okay, so last year one of the best adjustments we made in a game was we played Cox the second time in the region championship. We started out flat, nerves. High school kids, you don't know what you're going to get, and it's not a knock on them because they're great kids, but you don't know what you're going to get. Kids' emotions are up and down. Sure. So, we didn't come out our best, and Cox took advantage of that, and it was a fairly close game. I want to say it had to be like a 4-3 game. We were up, and, we made a couple adjustments at halftime where we were not taking care of the ball offensively. I said, guys, you don't need to get the ball and go to the cage every single time you get the ball. I go, wear them out a little bit. You want to wear their defense out. They'll start making mistakes if you start moving the ball and you're patient. And we started to do that, right? And also the biggest thing was we were winning faceoffs. Yeah. They didn't have the ball rarely at all in the third quarter.
They struggled to clear, too. I was at that game.
Yes, they struggled to clear. And we took advantage of the openings we had. I mean, if you watch that game, we rode hard a couple times. They had a couple times they were hard time clearing the ball. We took advantage of it, and we got a goal off of it. The biggest momentum in that game was Kieran Auld, our close defender, picked up the ball, ran up the field, and stuck it in the corner, and that got the team going. That was right before halftime. I thought that was the game changer, and then we made the adjustments at half. Yeah. But our kids, they understood because they practiced it. This wasn't something new to them,
Sure. I love the environment that your parents made on game day when you go as a kind of visitor fan and you're just there watching it. Like, you guys got after it from the perspective of, like, crowd noise and just excitement. I think that says a lot to the school and, like, okay, we added this as a varsity sport, and I hope that is a message to other people to say, come watch.
Oh, parents, the Kellam parents are amazing. They're so supportive. Probably the best group of parents I've ever worked with, and we have an amazing AD. Amy Pratt, this is for you. She's the best. She's given everything we've asked for, super supportive of our program, and, the whole atmosphere. She is the reason why Kellam Sports has such a cool atmosphere over there.
That's such an underrated, not talked about thing is the infrastructure. Is it chaos behind the scenes? Because there's a lot of shit that goes on.
I have a lot of respect for ADs or SACs, they call them. They have a lot of things going on at once. Like, you're dealing with multiple sports clubs. You got to remember clubs too. So the fact that we get such support from our athletic director is amazing because she is juggling 1,000 things at once. Absolutely. And especially with lacrosse being so new here. Yeah, Amy Pratt. She's the best.
Thank you, Amy Pratt. Appreciate it. All right, we are going to finish up this episode. I'm going to have Pat back on probably more frequently just to get into some of the lacrosse talk. It's fun, man. It's good discussions. But we've been having major issues with the camera, so I don't want it to randomly go off and us, sit here watching Beetlejuice highlights here for another 30 minutes. So lightning questions I'm going to throw at you, man. We talked about the pit game. I love that discussion on today's show. Sure. How do you coach it in practice as far as like a drill or specific ways you implement the way you're teaching the pit game in practice?
Just reps.
Is it in like a 4v4 concept? Is it split field?
Well, first you got to show it, like how it works, right? And then you start to do in possibly a 3v2 or a 4v3 or whatnot. It depends, right? But absolutely, like you have to rep it. And then the kids, and then you have to, and then when you're doing it 6-on-6, then you got to stop it if they're not doing it right, and then show them then.
This Notre Dame team this past year, I know it's been like months and months since the college season, so it's kind of blurry. That's the way my memory works, at least these days. But Tell me a little bit about like your thoughts on that team, man, and like how dominant they were, or another team that you thought could do it and just fell short.
Notre Dame reminded me of a Long Island team. The fact that the Kavanaughs and Entenmann are Long Island guys, but they just play with a blue collar, I don't care who you are, I'm going to kick your ass mentality. And you could see how structured they are. And, they rarely made mistakes. I mean, once in a blue moon, you'd see them make mistakes on defense. But after that, it was like they shut it down. I mean, the Faceoff X, they were dominant in the Faceoff X. Offensively, you could not key on one guy. If you try to key on Pat Kavanaugh, guess what? His brother was open, Jordan Faison. You had Dobson, the big lefty. I mean,
who's the kid that had hit the twister?
Oh, I forgot his name.
Devlin?
No, I don't know.
Ryan
I can't
Tevlin
remember. I can't remember. But he, that time, 13. I can't remember his name either. But they are just coached extremely well. Coach Corrigan's been there for 35 plus years. He knows the guy can recruit. He's a no-nonsense coach. And that's why you're seeing them win, because he's been there forever. He's seen what it's been. And I remember when I was, right before I went to Hofstra played Notre Dame at Hofstra, and Hofstra beat them like 6-5. Yeah. You could see how much the Notre Dame program has progressed. And I tell you right, they might win it this year.
Especially offensively. I mean, they could win it this year, but yeah, especially offensively.
Oh.
Like, they used to be dominant D. Who was the guy, right? Like, Perkovic was there for a little while. And then there were, obviously, I'm missing a lot of guys.
Ryder Garnsey was absurd.
But they never had, like, the 6-player deep, like, depth, man. It's crazy.
And if you notice in Division I lacrosse now, these guys are freaking huge.
Yeah, of course.
Huge all around, So that's a big difference. You got to be an athlete.
All right, so overtime questions here. What's one thing a player can do right now to improve themselves? Number one thing.
It's working on your game, and that there's so many different ways you could do that. You can get one-on-one instruction. Going out and throwing the ball up against the wall. Your stick work is a must. If you want to go anywhere, regardless of what age you are, your stick work's got to be there, right? I think if you're a high school player, it's playing. You need to be out there playing, but you're also going to be in the weight room. If you want to play in college, you have to be physically ready to go to college and play, because it is a transition regardless if you're playing D1, D2, or D3, okay? And you know this. I mean, I think those are the key things. I think it's getting yourself out there. Any way you can take an advantage of learning the game of lacrosse, I think as a kid, you need to take advantage of.
All right, this is an extra one. Keep it short. I don't know how much battery we've got left, but timeout, 30 seconds left, tie ball game. You have the ball. What's the play?
What's the play?
What's the play, or what are you telling your boys?
What am I telling the boys?
Who are you putting it in? You got 30 seconds, Coach Aiello.
I think you know what? I think you let the boys. I don't think you put it on the boy, like you tell them what to do. I think you go to them. Okay, what's going to work here? What's the best thing we can do here to win this game? Because you put the confidence in them, they're going to be like, we got this. Because when you put pressure on a kid, you don't know how they're going to be. But if your players see that you trust them and they trust you, forget it. It's over. That's what I would do in that situation.
I love that answer. And last question, a favorite drill and why?
Army drill, one-on-one. Why? I can't really show what it looks like here, but it depicts what I want to, like, simulates game speed. It's not like your typical one-on-one from the sideline. It's that we did this at Catholic. The two guys are back-to-back, and they run around the cones, and it simulates a one-on-one. But it simulates
short area.
Yeah, it simulates a game. Like, it's not like you're going to regular one-on-ones. I love those drills because those go from one-on-ones to two-on-twos because they're both doing it at the same time.
Yeah, so basically you line folks up inside maybe like where the crease would be.
Yeah, with the cones, the top cone, the attackman runs around. The bottom cone, the defender runs around. So they're both coming out to play each other. Yeah,
and it usually simulates a game environment because the defensive player, the way the cones are set up, he's coming out of the paint, as I like to call it, but like the middle of the field, and he's going out toward an attackman like that ran around a cone on like the low wing.
Right, and what does that work on? Your approach. You can work on your approaches on that. Angles, right? And you can eventually go to a 2-and-2 on it. So that's my favorite drill.
Pat, this has been an awesome combo, man. I appreciate you joining me.
Thanks for having me, guys. Tune in. This is a fun podcast. It's going to be a great series.
Thank you, man. It was the extended cut as well. He was, I mean, damn near 3 hours that we're here for this 1 hour podcast. But guys, thank you so much. I'm Zach Quezada, Pat Aiello from Kellam Lacrosse. Can't wait to see what you guys do this year.
Thanks, man.